Rappahannock County Board of Zoning Appeals to order tonight. What, oh, this turn it over.
Oh, you have to start over. Screwed up already.
Oh, we got
Okay.
it. I'm calling this meeting of the Rappahannock County Board of Zoning Appeals to order. All the members are here. David Connick here.
No, I'm David Conn.
Alex Sharp, I'm here. Ron McElroy.
I am here.
Chris Bird. is
Also.
here. Jennifer Matthews is not here tonight.
She's across the
See, okay.
so to speak.
The next item is adopting the meeting agenda. Are there any additions, deletions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to add a public comment period at the request of a member of the public. And I think that it has to do with the letter that the BZA wrote to the Planning Commission about the comp plan and the consultant's report that just came out. So I'd like to add that, I guess, after,
The special use permit?
yeah, let's get poor Mr. Brown out of here. Well, I don't know, maybe he wants to be last, that way he can, I always try to get more billing time. Let's move him to the back.
You get that last one?
Okay.
And the second change is I would like to add this business, I guess under new business. Under old business, I'd like to add a discussion of that same letter amongst us and what was reflected in it. And,
Is this a letter from a while ago?
no, this is the letter that we wrote and then the consultants report back to the Planning Commission so we can tell Mr. Bird what we think or whatever. And last but not least, this cell tower issue, that there's two pending cell tower applications, and I think the board ought to discuss that and also instruct Mr. Bird what our position is as a board, if we have one, about these cell towers in Woodville and Scrabble. So I put that under new business.
And is that a motion to include it?
That is, I so move.
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion on that?
No, then I move with the, as
Wait,
amended
hold on.
to adopt the agenda.
Oh, you're moving as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Next is the minutes from the August 28th meeting. Jennifer's not here, so I don't know what we're going to do.
I don't know, you
Yeah.
guys are gonna have to read it. That's it. I'm sure they're accurate, but
Yeah.
Jennifer's the one that wants to.
She always catches the typos.
I do, I feel nervous about it myself. We want to table it till next meeting? That way we can patch it up if they appeal. You can do that, right, Mr. Brown?
Is there a motion?
Well, no,
Yeah,
after you find out they're appealing, then you can fix the minutes.
Is there a motion to adopt the minutes as submitted?
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes as submitted. I didn't find anything
Is there,
out of the ordinary.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Guys are gonna have to answer to Jennifer.
Don't try.
Okay. If there are any mistakes. Okay, the next item is Eldon Farms has applied for a special use permit to operate a tourist home.
Did everybody get Mr. Brown's letter? There was some.
There was a couple of letters, one original and then a more recent one. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. You're here for the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Sharp, gentlemen. Michael Brown from the firm of Walker Jones, representing Lane Eldon LLC, the applicant in this matter. The two letters that Mr. Sharp referred to, the original one addressed the additional standards pertaining to tourist home bed and breakfast uses. And then following the public hearing and appearance before the Planning Commission, we submitted my September 18th letter, which addressed a couple of questions that had specifically come up in remarks by Planning Commission members. We hope that you find the application complete and would ask that you, respectfully ask that you approve the issuance of the tourist home special use permit subject to any conditions you see fit to impose.
I'm concerned about the minimum acreage. Sorry, that usually comes up, so I just wanted to, no, I was looking carefully. Is there any questions from the board to Mr. Brown? I guess one thing well, very quickly would ask, just there's a diagram that kind of shows boundaries right around the house, and I'm guessing that's just boundaries of the use. Is that, you got that little picture? It just says boundary, and I'm assuming that's of the use, not the parcel.
This thing of 46 lot.
Yeah, see that, the checkered line that just says boundary? I'm guessing that's just where boundary of the use?
Yes, that's not a separate parcel.
Yeah,
It is
right.
on the larger farm parcel. And I think they prepared that schematic with the idea that that's the boundary of the proposed, the area that would specifically be used in connection with this proposed tourist home use, which includes the parking area and the ability of incoming and outgoing traffic to sort of flow around that little island and circle there that you see at the eastern edge of that area.
And so the septic field was identified, and I'm not sure if I understood, is it adequate to the use, or is it just adequate?
The opinion of the engineer, there's an additional statement that came in from Ms. Carter at the Rappahannock Health District. The septic system is sufficient for 2-bedroom, 4 occupancy, full-time use.
Right.
The engineer also noted that the system should perform satisfactorily for up to 6 persons occasionally. That's the word he uses, and he didn't attempt to quantify what occasionally meant. As long as the average occupancy remains at 4 persons or less.
So if there was 6 for 2 days on a weekend and nobody the rest of the week, that probably would be adequate.
That was our thinking in making the original application, is that even if the maximum that we proposed, which would be 6 persons in 3 bedrooms, were permitted on a Friday night and a Saturday night, your overall use is going to average out over the course of the week to less than what would be a 4-person full-time occupancy. I did submit in my September 18th letter a suggestion that if the board had concerns in that respect, that the board could impose a condition that limited the use to 4 persons until the system was upgraded. We feel like the system will be sufficient as it's currently designed, based upon the intensity of use that we're proposing.
But it's 2 bedrooms.
There is actually 3 bedrooms. There is one item in the original submission package that misstated that there were only 2 bedrooms. There are in fact
3 bedrooms.
3 bedrooms in the dwelling. That's
And you don't have a problem with the definition of tourist home?
I do.
No, he does. I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing something.
We're going to want to be consistent. It's my turn to ask questions.
If you want to, yes.
So I see this deed that you've attached to the application, Mr. Brown, which I think must be close to the world record of the longest meets and bounds description I've ever seen in all my years of practicing law. It's like 5 pages long. But I note in there that the property was conveyed to a Mr. William Lane, who I think is the patriarch of Lane Industries.
yes, sir.
So is that who still owns it, or when did it get transferred to Lane Eldon?
It is, the title is in Lane Eldon LLC. The Lane transferred all of their property holdings into the LLC, and that may have not been included in the submission packet. We included the original deed. I want to say that transfer occurred in the early 90s. I may be wrong about that. That may have been the later 1990s, but it is in the LLC. I'd be glad to submit a follow-up copy of that deed to this summer to Commissioner Curry.
Well, I don't know, do we have any tax records in here? And then the tax bill.
I don't think so. Anything else?
Yeah, I had another question, and that is that someone, oh, here's something from the tax officer.
You want me to ask others questions first?
Oh, it'd be really long.
Right on.
So, I understand, or it was my understanding from the hearing last week about the cell towers, that there's some other proposed use or plan for Eldon Farms, and that this is somehow part of it. Is there going to be events there, or is that the subject of some other permit application?
I don't have anything on that at this time, Mr. Connie.
Do you
I know that Mr. Janot, I was at that meeting, and I know Mr. Janot mentioned something about that in a public hearing, but I don't have any information on
I
that.
mean, is it going to affect this part of the property, or is it going to be somewhere else?
I don't know. I don't know where that use is proposed, or even if that's a fully developed plan at this point.
Okay. That's all I've got.
Ron, do you have anything?
No, I'm encouraged that we've sort of established the safety features now, and that these things are coming in, and those are becoming standard, because I think that's important. And they're there.
Chris, do you have any word from the planning commission about it?
The planning commission thought it was a reasonable suggestion and passed it,
Oh, recommended.
recommended.
Okay. Except for Holly, who wasn't there. That being said, I'm going to open the public hearing on this application. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this application? Okay.
Don't go all
There
at
being-
once. Is
there
there one
being-
at a time?
There being no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay, so we could go through and make the individual findings. Is that your suggestion? Or can we just blanket?
I don't think it's my suggestion, I think it's what the zoning ordinance says you have to do. So,
Okay. Do you feel up to reading the findings that you need to make? I guess we'll make a motion first. Can we have a motion on this application?
I move that we approve it.
No, second that.
Is there anything about the septic or
Anything about the
septic?
I think that the septic is not an issue, in that the occasional use of 6 people, and then the system rests for 5 days or a week or whatever, so there's really no adverse effects of the septic system.
Okay, and we feel like we've got, the health department has signed off on it, more or less.
It's in there.
That's right there.
Okay. And then what about these additional safety standards that, right? There were additional conditions that someone suggested,
Right, they've indicated that those are
so
all.
those will be included.
Oh, absolutely,
That's it.
yes, yes.
Okay, is there anything else in the
Yes,
motion?
The application is presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
we already got that.
Who got the second?
Ron,
Chris,
Oh, I
Chris.
seconded it,
Oh, he made it, you seconded it.
Yes.
Okay.
who made the motion in the second? Ron did, right?
I thought Ron made the motion.
Ron.
Mr. Bird,
No.
Bird,
We have the motion, for a second.
Mr. Mack was second.
Okay, good. I'm glad somebody was watching.
Yeah, that's the secretary's supposed to write all that down.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Someone spilled water on the files.
Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple more points that I would like to suggest for additional conditions, Mr. Chairman. The first thing is about signs. And as I pointed out in the past, due to some egregious error in draftsmanship, when the zoning ordinance was adopted in 1985, the last section of the sign ordinance says that unless you put some kind of a restriction on a sign for any special use permit in any zone, they automatically get the maximum allowed square footage in the commercial or industrial zone, which is, I forget how big that is, but it really seems like to me it ought to say, you get the smallest sign unless they say otherwise, but the way it's written, you get the very largest sign that's possible in the whole county unless the board puts a limitation on it. So I didn't hear anything about signs. Are they going to have a sign, Mr. Brown?
It's mentioned in the first application letter, Mr. Connie. There's, Slaughter Lane is already marked with a Slaughter Lane private lane sign out at 522, and that's the only signage we propose.
But I mean, it's not going to be like Slaughter Lane bed and breakfast?
No, sir.
Not going to be anything like that?
No, sir.
This is,
No lights?
But you don't anticipate.
We thought
Welcome
about a
to
big,
Slaughter Lane, it's not going to be
But you
on the
don't
side of the barn.
But would we allow them to have a small sign?
Well, they don't want one,
They don't
so.
want it.
we're not requesting.
it's basically the county signage is, that's it.
Right, okay, so the road sign is on. All right, so the next issue that I want to bring up is what about an expiration date or limitation, because we're running into this, are we going to limit it? I mean, because otherwise it's perpetual, and I don't think that's appropriate until the ordinance is changed, even if they stop and discontinue the use, to be started up again and so forth and so on. So I think we have to put either a time limit or at least limit it to the, while it's owned by Lane Industries or whoever.
You're talking about adding this to the motion?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So to go with the,
Or put out something like 5 years or 10 years, or I don't know, make them come back. Because if you don't do that, it's forever.
Okay. I'm not sure if I want to add that, really. We can decide.
We have been limiting it to the
but
current.
the problem you run into there is that if it goes with the ownership, part of selling the property is the fact that you are selling it with these, these structures that have been used and they will become vested basically at some point in time. As part of what you're offering up when you sell the property, that you have these available rental houses on the property.
So you support letting it go with the land?
It has, yeah, I think it has to, because, like I said, 15 years down the road or whatever, that all of a sudden it goes away, that violates what we discussed previously about vested interest, and that, after a certain amount of time, it is what it is.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, I agree with him, whatever he said.
Well,
I'm just saying.
we have done that in the past. The other thing is, I'm not sure about 15 years. I mean, what if they stop using it for a period of 5 years? Should they have to come back and reapply, or some
No,
other period of
well,
2
maybe
years?
the ordinance should be changed.
Well, but how, then that might not affect this, it might not affect this one because this was granted in perpetuity.
Okay. We could add that if the use was abandoned, it would go away, abandoned for 2 years.
You okay with that?
And how,
Would that, I mean,
and how would that be determined?
The zoning
I guess
administrator.
somebody would figure that out and call us.
They'll stop if they stop paying taxes on it.
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. If they didn't file meals and lodging tax for 2 years, I guess it might be.
Okay, yeah.
Plus, the applicant doesn't object to that, so it must be reasonable.
Right.
So we're gonna heap on these things.
Okay.
Yeah, but that should be enough, or do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
He's gonna vote against it anyway because he doesn't like the definition of tourist. Is that true?
Can I say that? Now you're gonna
Okay.
steal my thunder?
Okay,
Say how I'm gonna vote?
Okay, well, I'm just making a prediction. Okay, is it any other additions? Because I think we're just looking now at the signage being limited to basically no.
The road sign?
The road sign, which is the state road, right?
No,
The state sign.
it's a state.
Yeah.
Yes,
It is one of the
states.
county.
Well, I mean, it's a
yes,
county
one of those
road sign,
green.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a county,
Okay, so
it's a county road.
So no commercial sign.
no signage anticipated. And then that it would, if abandoned for a period of more than 2 years, the use would expire.
Is abandon the right word if we're putting the criteria on the meals and lodging tax?
Okay,
Then
well-
it should read that the meals and lodging tax are not paid.
Well, I think
for,
if the
period.
use is discontinued for 2 years, which could be evidenced by the meals and lodging tax.
Maybe they could just update the action.
Okay, so I think that's all, is that okay?
I wrote that so allegedly that, no, we can say that it says whatever.
Okay, are you,
Is there anything else?
No, I'm fine with that.
okay,
Okay.
I'm fine with that, although I would like to have the exact wording of the motion read now so that we know exactly what we're voting
Could
on.
you,
I lost it. Paper with the condition.
well, you just include those.
Yeah, right, I do. You took it away.
You don't have to read them all.
All right, so the conditions are the attached 1, 2, 3, and 3A through E that were submitted by the applicant. The signage is limited to the road sign only, no other commercial signs. And if the use is abandoned for 2 years, it would automatically, or abandon or discontinue, the use would automatically terminate.
You can say
No,
discontinue.
I think if you're gonna put in the wording for abandoned use, it has to be it has to be based on non-payment of meals and lodging tax.
Okay, we'll do that based on.
Or you could say, it as evidenced by meals and lodging tax.
No room for.
Who says that taxing form is going to be in place forever?
Well, no, he's,
You're out of order, sir.
But he-
Public hearing, so.
no, hold on, he's probably right about that. No, I'm just suggesting it could be evidenced by the meals and lodging tax, it doesn't have
Well,
to.
how else would you be, I mean, there's gotta be some determining factor if you're gonna put that in.
If it became a private residence for 2 years, it would have terminated, right?
How would you know that it became a
I don't know.
private
I don't know.
residence
Let's-
for 2 years?
Why don't we
They
let
didn't,
someone
they wouldn't
else?
pay the meals and lodging tax.
That's one thing, but
Yes.
let's not get,
That was,
but let's not get hung up on that. I
well,
think,
no, but
well, how do you do it in any case? How do you prove that a use terminated or was abandoned?
that's what I'm saying. Why
What
do
if
you-
there's
why do you
some-
put it into the motion if there's no way of determining it?
Let's
You
make
get-
them come back in 5 years and do it.
You get testimony from somebody who says it was a private residence for 2 years.
How about if we make it 5 years and they have to come back to the zoning administrator every 5 years and demonstrate that they're still operating it within the conditions of the permit?
Let's
And then-
not do that. How about, if they abandon it, if it's discontinued, that can be established somehow. I think we have to establish that tonight.
Okay.
Okay? Is that okay? I mean,
Fine with me. I don't think it's a
You okay with that?
necessary part of the
I was gonna say-
application myself.
okay. I mean, it's just a technical. Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
I'm going to vote no on the same grounds as always, and I don't think that what this proposed use is, which isn't going to be by the testimony and what they file in their application, is not going to be used for more than 7 days. It's a short-term rental that's not really a tourist home, so therefore, I don't think it's a permitted use that we can grant a permit for under that section of the ordinance. So, as usual,
Okay.
I will vote no.
So it's passed. 3-1.
3-1.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Very good, nice, complete application for a change. Why don't you do them all?
Good pressure watch.
25 minutes.
Okay.
.45.
So, Mr. Coniff, do you want to lead the discussion of the letter to the planning commission? What you want to talk about there?
Can you pull that up? When you're, whatever,
Public comment was next.
what?
Oh, wait, public
Yeah, but
comment.
can you do that?
I will try.
Well, I tell you what,
Public
while you're
comment.
doing that, I'll do public comment. Is it anybody who'd like to speak? I'm assuming this is on a topic related to our business.
Yes. Can you, I couldn't hear you.
I said, does anybody wish to speak? I'm assuming it's on a topic related to our business, like our board.
Yep.
Identify yourself.
Page County Tax District. First, I want to acknowledge and commend you all for your letter to the planning commission that I guess you're going to talk about. All right, I think it was a good thing, and I'm happy to see that someone in the county is pushing those issues. I also noted that that many of what you brought out was at least somewhat touched on by the consultant, and so, lack of a better term, you were somewhat vindicated. And I also want to point out that it was on the Planning Commission's last meeting as information only, which indicates to me they intend to do nothing with that report. Maybe I'm wrong, but and last, I do remember you talking, I don't know which meeting it was, about doing another letter in regards to the various amendments that are pending. And you chose not to do that because you felt it would fall on deaf ears and whatever. Anyway, my point is that I think it is time for another letter, and I ask you all to do that. I ask you all to make it a little bit more general than just the May amendments. There's a lot of things that aren't covered in there that need to be addressed. Tourist homes, for example, definition of a tourist home, all right? I also would request that you give clear direction to Mr. Byrd so he can carry that water while at the Planning Commission. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it anyone else? Okay, I'll close the public comment period now. Any thoughts?
Well, have you all read the letter from that's our letter, but, the letter from the consultant.
We did.
Oh,
That's on the Planning Commission's last agenda.
How come we don't have our picture on this board? You want to discuss that?
They're afraid to break the camera.
Why don't we have our picture as a board on the board? When you turn to BZA.
Yes.
Okay, that's because we don't have a dress code. Right, well, that's the letter. Have you all seen it? Or read it? No, not you.
I've looked at it.
I will confess that, no, I haven't seen it, and I have meant to look at it or whatever, but I've heard reference to it, but I never received anything via email stating that it had appeared, and, I think it should have been sent to the board members, and it wasn't.
Hopefully
Or at
not.
least not in my email.
Well, I didn't see it until I saw it on board docs right before the planning commission meeting, but anyway, maybe you could flip to the actual, whatever they said, because that's just a cover, if you would. Right. Right, they've got a nice chart with 20, what's on the next page? They've got, 20-some things that they have like a checklist. But anyway, there are quite a few things, and maybe we gotta just table it, since apparently the planning commission's not gonna do anything right away, but there's quite a few things in there which I think are very similar to what we said in our letter, like some things, some issues, like fire and rescue was one, because I know we talked about that, the part of the comp plan that says, the same thing that it said for like 35 years, I think, since 1980. The exact same words that said, the fire and rescue volunteers have to be replaced by paid people, paid staff. And, we're going to have to deal with it. And the consultant said, well, it's supposed to be a comprehensive plan. Like, how are you going to deal with it? And that's not in there. And that was sort of the comment about a couple of different things. The agriculture decline that we talked about, and the comp plan recognizes that certain trends are happening, but it doesn't have any like remedy or solution for what's supposed to then happen to correct it or cure it or amend the plan or anything. So there were quite a few comments like that, and I mean, if everybody hasn't read it, I suggest that we put that on our agenda for next meeting, and then Jennifer will be back, and I'm sure she'll read it. And I think we ought to discuss it, because some of these things are, I mean, I have to say, I've been to a few planning commission meetings since, you know, when they've discussed this, and I went to, I think, 2 of the different work sessions they had for as long as I could. And I have to say that it just seemed to me that I didn't hear a lot of discussion about the subject matter. I heard a lot of discussion about how hard it was going to be, or how much time it was going to take, or, you know, but they didn't really talk in a substantive way about some of the issues that we raised in our letter, and basically it's the same thing that the consultant says. And I think that's really the purpose of the planning commission, is to kick some of this stuff around. I mean, we've got a couple things, you know, I mean, the tourist homes, they kicked that around a time or 2 or 5, and they came up with a consensus, and then they never had a public hearing and adopted any of it. And we're still dealing with that in a lot of cases. I'll give you another example. One of the things that was in my August 2016 memo to the Planning Commission, which we talked about, I mean, it was on my, it came from me, but one of the things that we talked about was this definition problem, where we've got B&B and tourist home, and the only differentiation is whether it's for just a couple days or usually a week or more. And which Alex always says, well, usually, but not, doesn't have to be.
No, it's usually a week or less.
Or for a B&B. For
No,
a
for a
tourist.
tourist home as well.
No, that's.
I mean, that's the practice.
Well, anyway.
Usually is not a good word in that.
Well, exactly. I mean, you know, I mean, what's the point? And frankly, why don't they have a short-term rental? Well, we've discussed all that, and the Planning Commission hadn't done anything about it. Now, last month, we revoked a special use permit for a B&B. And what do you know? To get out of coming back to see us, the applicant has withdrawn their application to amend the special use permit, and they filed for a country manor.
Country inn.
Country inn. Well, the definition of country inn says not more than 40 people, but it doesn't have a minimum on it. So you could have 3 people, and if you don't want to come to the BZA, where we're actually sort of going by the book these days, I'm happy to say, we're more by the book, you could just take it over to the supervisors, where you can, you know, get them to rule on it. And it's all because the definition is inadequate. Not only that, but if you compare the special conditions, you know, that the various special use and special exception permits have to abide by, for bed and breakfast, which is up to, right now, up to 12 people, there's a road standard. It may not be very good, but at least it says if it's on a private lane, it's got to be at least a 50-foot right-of-way, unless the board makes another finding, and things like that. Well, if you look at, what's it called, Country Manor? Country Inn, whatever. There's no road standard at all.
Well, that's
And
true.
that's a much more intensive use. That's up to 40 people.
But that's true of most uses, there's no road standard.
Well, there are quite a few. If you look down, there's quite a few. A lot of them said it has to be on a paved road or a state highway. And so I don't want to argue the point, like whether that particular, it's not about that particular one, it's just the ordinance needs work badly, because, and then you've got a hotel. What's the difference between a country manor and a hotel?
Country inn.
Country inn.
He's got a manor on the bird. I can tell you the difference.
Somebody told me to watch my manners.
I'm happy to respond to that. I feel, I think, equally as frustrated as you by the lack
really
of motion on the, particularly those definitions. We've been trying, I have been trying to encourage them to do something. The attitude of the Planning Commission generally was that they wanted to concentrate their efforts and energies on getting the comprehensive plan done, and they would do these things after that had happened. Now we'll see the actual result, but that was the, what at least was articulated. They didn't want to delay the comprehensive plan anymore. They felt that was more important. I would be happy when, at our next planning commission, to mention that we needed the May amendments and the definitions worked on, because they are causing us problems in our ability to define and deal with special use permits. And but the outcome of that is.
I think it would be great if you said that.
Pardon me?
I think it would be great if you just said that.
Okay, but here, well, if I may just say one thing. If we could just get the tourist home definition straight,
Okay.
just that one, how about that?
Well, I think the other, the corollary to that, though, is that it has to go from the planning commission to the supervisors, and they would have to pass on it.
But rather than having a dozen different things, that one is causing us problems almost every other month, right? At least causes daily.
Yeah, but if you split them up, the supervisor's gonna have to go through separate public hearings too.
Well, yeah, I know, I understand, but.
I was going to say, how can a plan be done if you haven't dealt with
Well, we're
what
not,
needs to be in the plan?
we're not even talking about the plan, we're talking about the ordinance. I mean, its changes are.
Well, yes, but no, he said, as far as the plan goes, that they want to get it done. They just want to get it done, but they don't want to deal with the issues that will make it be done. I mean, chapter 7 and chapter 8, there's nothing there. That's what it's the plan and the implementation, and it's not there. So it's not.
It's not only that
done.
it's not there, they're not even talking about it.
That's
Like,
what I mean.
what should
It's
be
not
there?
Done.
There hasn't been a discussion of
So
it.
how can you say we just want to get it done so we can work on it some more?
You know, I hear, and then some of the commissioners say, oh, well, there's nothing to stop us from keep on working on it once we get it done. But A, it still isn't done, and B, for the last, how many years, 14 or 16 years, they haven't worked on it then, or they haven't done anything to actually, there have been one amendment. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I don't know what we as a board can do except to send Mr. Bird over there and, you know, maybe light a fire under somebody, but I mean, somebody told me the other day they were coming uptown to go see some show called Waiting for Godot, and I said, are you going to the planning commission meeting, or?
Okay, that's good.
But your letter didn't, sorry to interrupt, your letter mobilized the public, and that's what was the powerful part about it.
Okay, so my issue still gets back to, there's a couple of things that genuinely affect us, which I think it would be reasonable for us to expect. The definition
Okay,
of
the definition of tourist home.
tourist home is one, maybe there's only one, and as far as I'm concerned, it's really critical.
So that makes it done?
No, it's just that's an ordinance definition that is not consistent, and therefore we have one negative vote every time a tourist home comes up as an application, regardless of the merits of the application. We have one no vote, which it doesn't, I mean, I see your point, but it doesn't seem like we should have a situation like that.
Well, I completely agree, and so I will take it under advisement from the board, and I think the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I think it's unanimous that the definition of tourist home needs to be dealt with immediately.
And it should reflect what the actual practice is, which is
Absolutely.
short-term. The definition now says generally more than 7 days. It could almost be never as much as 7 days, because that's the practice. That's the practice. And so people are applying for a tourist home, and they say, we're going to rent it out over the weekend. 2 and 3 days. Sometimes it's as long as a week. There's no reason for the ordinance to define it as generally longer than a week, because it is never as long as a week, or longer than a week.
Very rarely.
Yeah, and so why?
It says right now, a tourist home and/or boarding house, and that's the other thing. A tourist home and a boarding house are very
They're
similar uses.
totally different.
Well, the tourist home, what people are applying for now is not a boarding house, that's for sure. But a tourist home and/or boarding house is distinct from a bed and breakfast in that the term of accommodation for guests is generally longer than 1 week per annum. For those of you who don't know, 7 days. Spelled out, not an Arabic.
And that is true of a boarding house. Yes.
Well, that's their one definition now.
But they're
all-
not
I
the
know.
same thing.
They're not the
What
same
is
thing.
do boarding houses even exist anymore?
Well, it could.
To the
It
extent,
could.
that's, I mean, a boarding house is something from the past where you rented a room and the lady that owned the house fixed you dinner.
And if a man owned it, a man would fix you.
But the point is that the term is antiquated and probably shouldn't even be in there anymore.
Because you get room and board.
Well, I'm bored talking about it, and it's different than board.
But there may be a place for a boarding house. I don't, I've never seen us with an application. for
There was one in
boarding
Sperry
house.
Road there on the corner.
Was that a boarding house or a?
At one time, it
hotel?
was, well, then it was a hotel, but before that, I think it was a boarding
Did they
house.
ever
That was back
apply?
when?
But they never applied for a
What?
permit, did they?
Back in the old days.
Yeah, but that was.
Before there was an ordinance.
That's what I'm saying, on the definitions, why, I mean, how much time can it actually take to go through the definitions?
Less time
And
than
just
we've
bring
been
them up to
arguing
date.
that,
I mean,
because it's
just
all been done for them, it's all sitting there, it's all done. And the thing that I just want to add to what you said, it's not just bed and breakfast and tourist home, because you've got these other things floating around, like country inn, retreat, or lodge. And the definition of that is a use which provides temporary lodging, meals, entertainment, recreation, etc., whatever that may be. Use your imagination. For up to 40 persons in a rural setting. Well, I have to say, I mean, one of the issues that we've discussed a lot about, and we have, and maybe the planning commission too, about B&Bs is when they're out in not in the village environment, but out in the country and they're on a private lane, what's appropriate? Because a lot of people out in the villages, people don't mind having, somebody next door that they don't know or this or that, but out in the country and you're living on a private road, that's an issue. Well, up to 40 persons is a lot of people. And yet, when you flip to the special standards, you don't have any road requirement, nothing about private lanes or not private lanes. So those things need to be tuned up and the definitions need to be tightened up so that, because right now, if you just fix tourist home and somebody says, well, I don't qualify for that, or I'm not on a 50-foot right-of-way, can you think of any situations where that might be the case? Well, great, let's apply for country inn because there is no road standard for that, and then we can have up to 40 people.
And from what I heard when you were reading, entertainment. What is entertainment?
Well, that
Girls.
Time, sounds amplify, I mean, there's a lot that goes along with that term, that if you just put in entertainment, that's wide open, I mean.
Okay, but the way
And then,
David, the way the ordinance has been modified has been in the past reacting to specific situations.
right, that's how those things got in there.
Some clause goes in that only covers a bed and breakfast because a situation came up where the road was an issue. It hasn't come up, I doubt whether you'll see golf course, there's no road requirement on a golf course or a, what do you call the golf, country club. There's no, that I know of, no road requirement.
Well,
There's no road requirement on a country inn. There's all kinds of uses because they haven't come up. And so that specific use has not been addressed. to change the ordinance, and I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think the uses should be anticipated if possible. So that, you know, you could say all uses of certain intensity should have a road standard, if that's in fact what you want to do. And not, oh, because you had this one instance that was controversial.
Well,
now
I
we're
agree
gonna
with
put
you.
that- I mean, that's basically.
Well, that's why the whole thing, that's why doing it in a piecemeal fashion, like what has sort of been suggested tonight, is not going to get it. And I mean, then I invite you to read the definition of hotel or motel, which is only allowed in commercial, general, industrial, and highway commercial zones. But then it goes on to say, it provides sleeping accommodations in 6 or more separate units or rooms for transients on a daily, weekly, or other similar short-term basis, whether such establishment is designated as quote hotel, inn, automotive court, motel, motor inn, motor lodge, tourist cabin, tourist court, tourist home, or otherwise.
I want to have the otherwise.
Well, what I'm suggesting to you is anybody that wants to do that type of a use can just look at where they are and then look at the definitions and say, okay, I'm going to pick that one because that's so poorly written and they're not coordinated that, I mean, for example, they'd ought to say if it's more than 10 people, which is the standard they agreed to set because that's within the building code, for a tourist home or a B&B, if it's between 10 and 40, then it's a country manor. But then it ought to have country inn, but then at least I'm consistent, but then have the real standards. It's a way more intensive use. Another mistake, I guess, is country inn is under, because of what you just said, Ron, it's under the amusement and recreation section, whereas a B&B with only 10 or 12 people is in the commercial and business section. So there's all kinds of things that don't make sense and need to be worked on, and I mean, they could do it in one meeting if they would do it.
But it's what you just.
I would like to get direction. What I'm thinking of is this is short-term rentals.
Well, that's one. Then B&B, then tourist.
Well, I mean, the
whole
whole
category.
Oh, this category.
Yeah, the category is short-term rental.
Oh, short-term residential, or I don't know if you call it residential, you know, in accommodations. however.
Short-term accommodations.
Yeah.
And short-term could be
Up less than 30 days.
less than 30 days.
Right.
Okay. Well,
All those categories should,
Okay.
I mean, all those different uses that I, the hotel, motel,
All under
tourist home, all
single
should be under that.
Yeah.
And they need to make it so it's all,
So are you saying that should be a separate category?
well, it could be, I'm just
A
saying,
single category, it needs to be integrated, whatever.
it needs to be integrated, they need to be cross-referenced, so you don't have all these loopholes where somebody can say, oh, well, I only have 5 rooms, but now I'm gonna call it a country inn instead of a B&B, because I can't get a B&B permit because I don't meet the standards, but this one doesn't have any standards, so I'm in.
And then once,
I will work on that. That is in the works at the moment. One of the commission members is working on it, and I will try to get this together.
Which one? Because I wonder if they've seen the memo that I already wrote with all this stuff in it and
It's
all this.
Holly Mead.
Okay.
And
Well, I'll send it to you in a copy of what I wrote back in
Great.
August of 16.
okay, does that cover that?
I think it does.
Are we okay then?
I guess, and then we're gonna table the rest of the comp plan stuff for next
We
meeting.
can take the letter and put that on the agenda as next.
Right.
That,
Yeah.
and then
Right.
discuss it. Okay.
Okay, great. So last but not least, the cell tower business.
Well, feel free to go.
Well, I mean, what I want to say is what I sent around this morning, and I want to give credit to both Mr. Kerry and also Martin Woodard, who got up at the public hearing and read what's in the comp plan. which, you know, we've had all this discussion even tonight, and the planning commission is all this gnashing of teeth and back and forth, and oh, woe is me, and years of studying and so forth. And meanwhile, what they have on the books now, inadequate though it may be to the task at hand, when a big meeting like that comes up, nobody referred to it, and not on the commission anyway. And here's what it says. We, the people of Rappahannock, declare it to be a scenic county, and all goals, principles, and policies will reflect and devolve from this fundamental recognition. These are the cornerstones upon which all of Rappahannock County's land use planning shall stand. A scenic county shall mean one in which preservation and enhancement of the natural and historic beauty and cultural value of the countryside shall be respected as being of foremost importance, and one in which conditions for a sustainable agricultural and tourism economy not be dependent upon traditionally defined growth patterns as have developed in jurisdictions to the east as a consequence of the growth of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Goals, I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to read the first one, which is what Martin, to his credit, highlighted. Goals. 1, to preserve the overall viewshed of the county in its unspoiled natural setting, which gives it special character and identity. And besides me and Phil Irwin and Martin Woodard, I don't think anybody really piped up or said that. So Bob Ryan has submitted these things, and I think he submitted them to the Planning Commission too, but here's the view of the one tower before and after from Red Oak. And this one's from 522, and this one's from higher up on Red Oak. And I mean, the thing is going to really stick out. And there are other options. The applicant has proposed a lattice tower, which has got to be the most offensive one of all.
Is that Eldon?
This is the one on Eldon, yeah, one. And you know, we have other ones in the county. That the one at Benvenue, I'd have to drive by that at this sort of coming this way, and I mean, it's I don't know what color it's painted, but it really blends into the mountain. If you didn't know it was there, you probably wouldn't even hardly notice it. But this thing and the one in Sprayville, I don't know if any of you have been up on Little Jenkins Mountain or up that way, but I mean, it's like, I mean, it looks like they're launching a cruise missile from Sprayville somewhere.
You're talking about the one.
Well,
the one they built.
Yes,
Yeah.
but in all fairness to the people that put that in, they were asked to paint it that color by the Board of Supervisors.
That color?
Yeah, white.
Yes.
That blue.
Yes.
Sky blue.
They wanted to paint it, the normal color is dark, or they just actually let them sort of rust,
Sort of a
and so
brown
it just sort of, you know, to try to help it to blend in, but the Board of Supervisors in their infinite wisdom said, no, we want it sky blue. And so you can see what we got, you know, and so you can't really play that on the people that put
All
the
right,
tower.
well, I mean, they could put a monopole, they said they would consider doing that, and they could also put it in a silo like the ones out here, which are completely unobtrusive. I mean, there's one right out here at the end of the road on the Miller Farm, and if you didn't know, and there's one down at Massey's in there that's in a silo. And I mean, if you didn't know that was in there, you wouldn't know. And that's much more compatible with the environment, and so I think that we ought to make that an absolute condition of at least our representative supporting it, that they do something to, because, I mean, what they're proposing to do, and you know, once they put it up, it's going to be there forever.
Well, that may not necessarily be true, because it can be written into the contract that when they become outdated technology or whatever, that they will have to be removed, and that's already been
It's going to be like the
discussed.
limit on the tourist home we just approved.
But
When is that?
my perspective on this is such that, I thought about it the other night during the planning commission because it was going on and on forever, and I was looking at the lights up here, and these are simulated kerosene lights. Because this courthouse has been here a long time, and at one point in time, it may have been actual kerosene lights, I don't know. But if we were back in the first quarter of the 1900s or whatever last Wednesday, and the people sitting there were making a proposal to put in poles all through the county and string miles and miles of wire, what would have been the reaction?
I'm pretty happy about it, I bet.
I mean, it was the technology of the time in order to bring electricity, and yes, it was visually obtrusive, but it was the only way you could get it there. And yes, and particularly reading Gary's comments, that, you know, they may need to take, you know, do a little bit more study on this thing, and that we may not need that many towers, but it's the basis of communication right now, and people, you can't, you know, just say, no, we're not going to do that here. And particularly the people from Eldon Farms came up and said, our daughter's getting ready to get her driver's license, and we live where we can't get any cell phone communications, and that's a big concern. And so you have to weigh all the issues and make it's the greater good. In that, you know, you've got to, yes, there's visually, yeah, you might see this thing sticking up there, but the good that thing is bringing about in a variety of areas, emergency communications, just people being able to be in touch with each other, whatever, you have to think about it. And yeah, we've got to do the best job we can to make sure that it's, you know, the controls are there, but technology is such that, yeah, you can't put them in a hole. That's not going to work. So they've got to be sticking up in the air. And in looking at Bob Ryan's stuff here, I mean, in order for us, you know, to be able to see the tower here, he made them white. Well, if he had made them green or brown, you would be looking at this picture and you wouldn't see anything. So it's not a very good way of illustrating what, you know, the effect is going to be on the view shed. So it's like I said, it's tough, and there's no perfect solution. But in the end, I think you've got to look at the greater good.
And I think a silo sort of is nice, but it's also kind of out of place to have a huge silo by itself standing in a field, and I think it's expensive as well.
Yeah, and quite now we're dealing with federal regulations also, and that when we required that before, I don't know if we've got that option now to put that requirement on.
But a brown monopole is fairly innocuous.
Well, Jennifer, who's not here, and I'm sitting in her seat, so Jennifer wrote and
Yes,
said
I read her comments.
she thinks it's going to be an obsolete technology and we shouldn't allow any more.
And that's why it has to be in the contract, that, you know, the agreement that we make, that when they're obsolete, they take them out. And
Well, how do you
I
define
believe you can
obsolete?
associate bonds with that, and that, you know, they have to put up the money in advance or whatever, so if they go bust or
Well,
are
obsolete
no longer in existence.
would be they stop using.
It's a 50 release.
One of the problems, though, is, you know, and that's another good point. 30 years from when? Because like the one in Sperryville, if they build it, it's up there, it's ugly, it's painted sky blue, and it doesn't have anything on it. That's my understanding, it doesn't have anything on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I believe that has to do with networking, and that it doesn't, you know, for the providers or whatever.
Well,
They can't just put one in, when they come in to do the work, it'd be cost effective or whatever, they want to bring in the crew and put all of them in at the same time.
My understanding is that they sold it on the grounds that it was going to be for the county, first responders and fire and rescue, and that was going to be a standalone thing, it wasn't going to be dependent on the other, certainly not these two. It was going to be a standalone thing. And now they're selling these two, that they're going to be part of a network with the one that they said was going to be a standalone. So, I mean, look, this is not my field.
Yeah, but
And
my understanding on the standalone had to do with radio communications for the fire and rescue, not cell phone communications. I may be wrong on that, but that was, Paige, do you know? Was that for, you know,
They
800 radio communications?
They leverage the fire and rescue intent, which you got to go on there, but you still don't have backhaul to get there, right, Gary?
Anyway, we were.
You don't want to answer.
We were starting to talk about the
So
scenic.
that can't get up there until the backhaul stalled,
Yeah, well, okay.
and they haven't done anything about that. So
Okay. We were talking about the scenic beauty as far as the comprehensive plan goes, correct?
Sure.
Okay,
I mean,
so we don't have to get
I
into
think-
the technology.
I hope not. 'Cause
Okay.
I'm,
Okay, 'cause
but
I'm-
that'll be a way to shut me up, because that's one thing, I heard one thing about.
I fix toilets, you know.
Well, the cell towers are a fact of life. It would be nice if they were scenically not offensive. And I think it is possible. And I don't know what else we can do about it.
Well, I think we can tell our representative that if they don't make some concessions on that,
On the scenic.
on the scenic aspects of it, either at the minimum, the monopole.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I-
monopoles, yes, are the least intrusive, and you can get the same results from a monopole as you can from a lattice, so yeah.
So
A monopole.
could we just say that we favor monopoles as opposed to lattice towers?
And I think that's, yeah, and I think the planning commission has already said that, haven't they?
They have.
Yeah.
Both of those towers are monopoles
So is
that
that,
they're planning.
Well, that's not what they said, unless they change it.
They
at
said
the
the other
meeting.
night they'd switch them over.
They said they would.
All I know is that everything we had seen in terms of whether it was the presentation by the company and particular people like Ryan are monopoles.
okay, so let's say that that's our position. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else on this?
Can you explain the position again, Alex?
We're favoring monopoles to minimize the disruption of the scenic beauty of the county.
Come up to our house tomorrow morning.
Well, no, but that's painted sky blue. I mean, I don't know.
No, you're not repainting it, so come on up and take a look.
Oh, they can't, I mean, but
No,
who asked them to paint it that color?
But they said $25,000 they could repay.
Oh, well, yeah.
The same
So make that a condition.
Yeah, well,
But they can be asked
Well,
to
the
paint it
resident
brown.
requested of the planning commission, and the planning commission agreed to take that as sky blue.
Well, the police at one family.
Well, that was a
Not the
mistake.
family.
That was a mistake, obviously.
But
I mean,
they
and
agreed
quite
as
honestly,
supervisors and said, okay.
on trying to repaint that pole now and have paint that's going to adhere for any amount of time.
Well, for the rest of the time, you're not allowed.
I mean, you're going to have to be repainting it every 5 years or something like that because, the paint just.
well, as it peels, it look kind of like camouflage.
But but are you saying the original?
Who do we
paint
go
is not
to
gonna
enforce the company?
The original paint was probably a baked-on type finish. It was like an auto finish, and that they sprayed it and it went through the ovens and it was heated on. And you try to put paint on, take your car and, try to brush paint it or whatever, and how long is it gonna last? It's not gonna last, so.
So the camel's nose is under the tent, and because that was allowed,
Well, that was actually
No,
requested.
Alex,
It was requested,
Alex.
but I don't want to get in an argument with you.
oh, I do.
I'm fine. Okay, well, I would say we're ready to adjourn. Would you like to make a motion? Is there a second? All in favor?
I